Good morning, folks. You are in the pension task force on September 22nd. Welcome back, folks. We are a little late getting started this morning, so I'd like to have us sort of dive into our first item on the agenda, which is to have some smaller group conversations so that we can take the list of potential options that we have been looking at over the last several weeks and invite each of the different membership constituencies of the task force to put a little more precision on scenarios that we might send to the actuaries for their analysis. And so I think what we've done here is we've got Will Krewald from the Treasurer's Office. Thank you, Will, for being with us this morning. And we've got a couple other folks from the Treasurer's Office who are retirement systems experts, and helpful to have one of you in each group just to help us in case we don't have the exact benefit structure that's currently in place on the tip of our tongue, and in case you see any red flags in terms of, gee, you know, if you start looking at that scenario, you're going to cost the system more, you know, red flag there. It's just so that we can go into these scenarios with eyes open and understanding what combinations might be worth exploring with the actuaries. It looks to me like we have some time to come back together as an entire task force afterward. And I think that's really helpful because, you know, it might be that the state employees identify something that the teachers say, oh, that's interesting. I think we'd like to explore that as well. And so I think it's helpful for us to sort of share the conclusions that we've reached in terms of what we want to look at and explore further with the actuaries. So we'll ask the Treasurer's Office folks to split up. We'll assign Chris Roop to a group as well. And Jeanette?
No, I just wanted to, before we actually go into the groups, I hope everybody got the email from me apologizing for not doing the, here's where I think we were on all of them, because it seemed, since we were going into the groups this morning, it seemed kind of beside the point to try to figure out where we were on all of those. So if anybody was expecting that or is disappointed, I apologize.
I just want to, from the looks of it, it looks like I might be broken apart by myself. Is that the way it's looking at? I would just ask personally, and I've talked about it with our, because there are members of Group C that are not part of the Troopers Association, I don't think it makes sense for me to be a part and make decisions on part of the entire group without at least being with some members of the state system, because like I said, we're talking about folks in the Attorney General's office and law enforcement that are not just troopers. And so I don't think it makes sense for us to be the ones to be the voice of the entire group when we only represent a fraction of that group. So
Maybe it would be helpful if you planned to just touch base in your subgroup. Just sort of check any boxes that be unique to the Troopers Association, and then you and the other task force member can jump in with the state employees group and participate the rest of the time that way.
Yeah, whatever.
I mean, I don't
whatever.
expect that because your group is so much smaller, I don't expect that it would take you as much time as it might take.
Yeah, like I said, I want to make sure that whatever choices are made for the whole group, that both unions are able to look at that and say, this is where we think it should go. So
Yep, that makes sense.
that's for sure.
Yep. Great. Any other questions or suggestions?
Question. Sarah, I think how you introduced the groups today answered something I was having difficulty with, particularly last time, which was there was a lot of discussion about combinations, and the combinations do affect each other, but I guess I was having a hard time wrapping my head around how to think about combinations without having each piece defined first, and knowing we have some pieces from prior work. It seems like identifying actuarial scenarios would be, our work would be new asks of the actuary so that at some point we could combine them together. Is that how I'm understanding our task today?
I think that I may have misunderstood what you said, but I think that the danger in looking at having the actuaries look at things discreetly as opposed to a package is that when you look at them discreetly, there's one result, but when you put them in a package, in that it impacts and makes huge difference. So I thought that the goal was to come up with some potential acceptable packages and then have the actuaries look at those. And if there are changes with that was what I understood, but I may be wrong.
I think sometimes it's hard though if we're combining things where we don't know what the impact is to then figure out how those, let's say it's 3 things we're combining, how each one of those individually impacts things. You know, we can see that collective whole, but then we're really not sure what that impact is.
Yep. So I completely understand what you're saying about that, and I think that it may be helpful to each of the conversations to have Chris and folks from the treasurer's office who have seen the analysis that's been done on maybe on just some of the component pieces that you're talking about, and they might be able to help us understand, you know, is that a high impact? Is that a medium impact? Is that a low impact scenario? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know, one of the things in particular I'm thinking about is the incentive, but I don't know that we have any idea of what that impact might be, and looking at some of those there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We may not have any analysis that we can turn to and say, you know, this is what the impact of that incentive will be. And so I think it's going to take us probably another round of analysis in order to figure out how to put more precision on some of what we're looking at here. Other questions?
Just a comment, I would say, Jeanette, I appreciate the nuance that you mentioned of when you combine things, they do affect the whole. I guess what I'm struggling with is if you just use a combination, you also don't know how to untangle those and understand each component piece. So to me, that seems like the best framework to go from is what are the possible options, get the cost impact, put them together, and then figure out how they interact with each other. Because otherwise it's hard to put them together. If you put them together, it's then hard to understand the distinct impact associated with each element.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. The way I thought it would work is that you'd have a package and that each part of the package would in the report, in the actuarial's report, this part of the package would contribute this much. This part of the package would contribute this much. So you can look at those separately in the package, but it's as they are in the package and impact each other. I may be wrong about that. Chris, do you?
No, if I may, Madam Chair, Chris from Joint Fiscal Office, to respond to Mr. Davis's question, and Senator White, your understanding is consistent with mine that whenever we ran analysis previously on a similar frame, the actuaries were able to cost out the individual impact of all the different options and also series of combinations. So, the key to remember there is, they can cost out, as Senator White noted, they can cost out the impact of every single individual option and what that's likely to do on its own. But if you were to combine multiple options, you don't want to just add your way down the column. That's when you want to cost things out together to see how things interact with one another, because different factors increase or decrease the contributions whenever they're of the individual options that are studied. A good frame of reference to see everything that has been studied to date that at least I'm aware of is a slide deck that I presented on August 17th to this group, and it's online, where you can see all the different individual options that were studied to date. And there's a slide that shows you the combinations of options that were studied to date, to give you a flavor of the range at which you're likely to see the numbers move from different options. So obviously we would want to run fresh analysis, however you all want, to make changes to those or to cost out things that weren't obviously already costed out or in different combinations. But it gives you some context and some flavor that, if you change this one thing, it will move the number, $8 million as opposed to $80 million. So I would suggest that slide deck, as well as the treasurer's report from January 15th of last year, would be really, really good documents to have at your fingertips throughout this exercise today, because they contain a wealth of background information about the different options that have been studied to date and how big the magnitude is of those individual options.
Do folks have those documents at their fingertips, or should we take a moment to allow people to rifle through their ever-growing file?
No,
That's it. Yep.
but I don't, the January.
Impact of,
The January treasurer's report, did we get that in paper form? Yeah, we did.
I think Chris included some of those options in that. document.
They're all, I copied it, almost all in the same.
So we don't need the treasurer website.
It's helpful for context, but it's full of good data, but the information about the actual options and scenarios is also included in my slide.
All right. Okay. Other questions from folks?
does anybody that doesn't have a hard copy of this want one? Because we can have them copied.
I have one question, Sarah Molly Stoner. I think I'm supposed to have that. I just wondered, I know I asked last time about the possibility of legislators working on the revenue end while we worked on, the unions worked on what they might want to think about. And it seemed like there was a hard no from you on that, Jeanette. And I'm just sort of curious what the protocols are. Like, I had understood our charge as being to possibly recommend revenue sources. I know we're not a decision-making body on that, but is that not what your understanding is of it? Or what do other people feel? Or
Personally, I feel like we've spent a lot of time talking about and costing out what the impact of certain revenues might be.
yeah,
And we haven't spent a lot of time talking about what combinations of scenarios we need to put in front of the actuary. And so I think we would be sitting around twiddling our thumbs to be told that we should sit and talk about revenue, because I think we have as far as how revenue impacts the charge of the task force, we have the information that we need.
can I just clarify my question?
Yeah.
I don't actually mean in terms of today and the hours today. I mean in terms of the long term. I want to make sure that as I look at what our charge is, that I have the right image in mind, that would in fact be part of the discussion. Is that true in the long run, that we're potentially going to make recommendations about revenue sources and that sort of thing as well?
I think if you read Act 78, it does say that we can consider revenue as part of our recommendations
Okay.
if we choose to.
Okay,
And right now, what I'm feeling the urgency of is needing to get hard data from the actuaries about what some of the other
the other pieces, yeah.
changes might be, whether they be incentives to employees to just, stick around longer, or
Mhm.
whether they be changes to contributions or
Okay.
adjustments of the COLA and whether those are triggered on the health of the fund or whether they're just,
Right.
permanent changes, all of those different scenarios that we need to look at are the ones that, and frankly, I mean, I guess I'll say this, I assume that you all understand this, but I'll say this for the benefit of people who are watching at home. I don't expect that I am going to be driving the conversation that we have when we break up into subgroups. I intend to be prompting and listening, asking questions and listening. I think that this needs to be an opportunity for the employee members of the task force to really, what about what we've done so far and what about your constituencies, teachers or troopers or state employees. And how do you think it makes sense for us to put these things together and put them in front of the actuary? I'm not driving. I may be facilitating the subgroup, but I'm not intending to be driving the conversation about where you land in terms of what scenarios you want to look at.
And just to clarify, I think you said Act 78 for anyone listening out
Sorry,
there, Act 75.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Did I say 78? 75 was pictured in my head, but I guess there's a link between my head and my voice that is missing this morning. Other questions? So Will, can you introduce us to the other folks from the treasurer's office who are with us today?
Sure. Nancy and Dawn, you guys want to stand up or do you want to come up here? Or so Nancy Dimmick, who's our Deputy Retirement Director, and Dawn, I forget what your title is. Chief Retirement Specialist. So I think Dawn's gonna help out with the research group and Nancy on the research.
Great. Okay,
Thank you.
excellent. Any other questions before we dive into the next section? All right, so we're going to keep the meeting open and streaming, but for those of you who are following along from home, I expect it may sound a little jumbled and you're probably not going to be able to follow word for word what's going on in the different subgroups, but we do want to keep it open so that folks can see, that we're all here working.
And that we're not doing anything nefarious.
We haven't gone back into some dark room.
Yeah.
So I think what I would like to say is let's have Dan Trottier and John Gannon locate sort of at that end of the table. And we can perhaps get somebody from the treasurer's office to sit with them for a few minutes before they join the larger group. Okay, thank you. And then let's go at this end of the table with Jeanette and Peter sitting down with Leona and Eric. And Commissioner Piszek as well, since you're already at that end of the table. And then the three teachers and Corey and myself, and perhaps Chris Roop, you can join us and we'll sit in the sort of in the back of the room and make a circle of chairs so that we can have our huddle there. Does everybody have an assignment? Have I forgotten anyone? All right. Great.
Okay. So I much prefer. Forgot where we're going. Like that.
Over there somewhere?
So we're gonna sit like this, kind of around the end of the table, so that we're looking at each other.
I don't think I might.
I know. Should I take that whole step?
Let's make a circle in the back row and the second to last row. Just shove the chairs out of the way and make a circle of chairs so we can sit back there. Just trying to find my latest list of potential options.
We don't need to.
Just because I watched it. Yeah. No. Well, I know. Is there some-
I think I got half of this.
Yeah.
So what is that? The liability goes out there. And now by 38. Obviously. But that's why. We want to get rid of what we want. We want to hit 100% this year or do we want to hit any extra growth? Anything after 2028 on the unfunded liabilities, we got have on our target 20. So that's a that loss that's not so we know. Somewhere in the middle. Yeah. That's a great question. From our standpoint. I know what I. And I know some of our some of those things that are some What does that look like?
Yeah, it's not done like. So it has like 35%. So that's 3 basis points. I'd say it's on the 8 actual, if it branch out, 60 basis points. But the recommendation is 138. But there's a primary is full back, it's not easy. So it's okay. Software. The second item, third, contribution to 2026. Yeah.
I think what was.
So we have that. Yeah, that's an something years ago.
So like, the next 4 years.
I think there's some church that this was also, I say that 35, it's a lot of you know, 5, 10, $13 number. I don't think it's gonna be involved in things or. We know that things that take a practice because it's fine. So I think there's. We can bring in. Sure. You can. It's not a question at all. It's not. I mean, like realistically, when the valuation's down, and then it's like, some budget numbers. Sometimes. Sure.
We left on the list. And I could be wrong, but I
I appreciate that. 100% is more. You know, we're coming from. We're supposed to control some idea. Because the Democrats. And the polls ideas are, you know, but it's important. By West, then assumptions were. I think what we're saying is on your. The target is several. That's already recommendation. That's baked in the whole. I don't know how it's a process. We don't know. I'm sure that's the one. No, I mean, I guess that's for us, that's not. The answer, yes, too, right?
But we can work on that. More, but, ultimately, we are out the one-time money that we have.
It's gonna take
So, from that point of view,
Well, first of all, I would. So if you want. Oh, that's okay. So, I would advocate for that. I also. How can we incentivize employees to work? I mean, that's important. Because right now, there's no benefit. That's right. Right. So.
At 50 because he's met the service, and so that's a unique aspect.
So you're. That's incentivized. To work. And I think the treasurer is work on that.
Like, what's the?
1%.
It's a dollar. Yeah.
2%. I don't know my.
So is it, what was that? Yeah, so if you go to that chart, yeah, it's the, comparison chart. It says that the master that they in that scenario, it's like if you work to 51, you get 2%, 54, and then ultimately 55, because that's the. 2% is 52, 4 is 60.
So that means around 50 or that?
So I think it has to be 20. So each year we're he's literally age 15. So would be eligible for the
No, I'm saying that's somewhere.
Yeah, I don't, no, again, I don't think that. This is just- The incentive is good, I think,
It's very dependent on other work. So it's just in a row of things.
at the same time, maybe more people take.
Well, maybe.
Certainly. At least if they have an option.
Yes.
It's an option.
Salary that is. That's our salary cap.
People want to do it.
Yes, so 16% of the set average salary in the month. We get that number. That's why I know that all the time. So that's 65. So that's just- we're being specific to someone who would work. Right, that's.
You have to model what it would look like for somebody to work. We have to see how that.
So start down. Exercise.
Basically, it's just a bonus. I think. More people.
Your middle income and lower.
So then next year. But so we're looking at it. They would just have to adjust the scenario to take right. The other thing should. So, yeah, so what they generally run is one is they said, okay, for all of us, it would be 50, 20, right? That's kind of the same thing. It's a number of people offering broken something like this. Or maybe one says that it just gets more. Regardless of the incentive. 10%. That part of the loan is already built. The opportunity is taking away whatever the implicit cost of getting their table. That's, they can do that. So, yeah, so the thing that I was these accidents, I'm just like, they can't predict the behavior. So we have no idea. How they might react. So, it's still. And they said about 10%. There's no way to know. That's just what we have to be. Yeah, that's what was created in, as far as. Yeah, no, I think it's projected that. Yeah, but at the same time, I think.
In other words, it's kind of like.
Yeah, I don't think maybe actually some model what the payment would be, just the, whatever you just show with the, just what the cost, just what the. No, one thing I just got brought up. Yeah. Federal law. Overcome. Is there any? Maybe that's one thing. Forward to their.
What their tax percentages at that. When going to set this on arbitrary. Legally. You can't go with this age, this you choose to say. I agree. Every year from Social Security. That's how they get and are continuing to work with it.
Right.
So that. Person could. Is that true? You want to do it or 27 or 7? Oh. I mean, yeah.
Yep.
And even checking it out, so like someone or
Tied to something, whether it's I did not save, you know, as much as they were variable, but I just don't want to. They could say the final taxes. This way. Why? 30 to 44 years of service. And you know, regardless of their age, and thereafter. If you go to increase the others, that requires like 100% per year. That is the percent challenge.
So like you said, once the fund reaches 7%, it's gold, right? Gold, it's not 7%. It's 70%, it's not this number, because it doesn't have to be. So, that's why we want to use that one. I just, the actuary said, it's very hard to keep it. So that's why I that's all I have to say. Everybody just makes it but make it very complicated, who you want to be to keep working.
Which is what already happened.
Yeah.
Then you're not gonna be kind of all 30 because you're gonna have to issue a so it was smooth. That's the other thing.
And then you also have,
Was not like that. Because I want to
I just had a actually ask the actuary about it. It's easy to say one day. It's hard to say. You know, there's 3 years. Say, oh, it's gonna be. So that money. Basically say what's the percent chance it's wrong, what's the percent chance it's back level. And then you can ask the role. So just that, I just, we just have to ask them how hard it is to do. Also, you can ask for it, be very clear about what you can say. Is that making it better? Is it percentage of? Yeah. You don't pay, CPI here necessarily. So that full CPI is greater than 1%, so maximum of 5%. Right, so there's a. So, whatever you. There may be. So what I mean by that, yes,
Every year.
Some of the ones that I'm trying to run in my head, so when you say breaks it down, so let's say you're 20 years. Balloon 5 minutes, right? Each year there will be a 5 years. It must be really right. Does it, but there's sense we don't know. 33 years. Maybe for you. Earlier. Okay, yeah, so just move this to over let's say later. So you're ending the curve. That can encourage one. No, I think that one. That would definitely. I don't think it would be retroactive. Yeah, I don't think it would be retroactive. That's another question. No, I don't think it has a. Change it for. That's just a way to make sure it's. And there's a more encourage. Maybe, and so it's. So you are. Necessarily increasing. So are you giving, it's going to be more other. Who's looking like. So like I was thinking. So that's what let's go right now. If you reach your AFC, they're necessarily working. It's smaller. You kind of keep working on the salary. Right. It's a linear relationship. So you have to see, you just start to increase. You see the changes on a rough basis. There's a way to take that percentage. So, we did a contributions memo. So what happened if you traded? So you right, say, you also saw one retired 2 year old. So this revenue, it's not the same as revenue. But it's the same thing, right?
They have not, we have. I guess in my mind, I just don't see how that. That's the contract, right? Yeah, I mean, it works like a tax. Gain for some folks, a loss for some folks, it's all about what percent of our board. And I. So the attitude is like, yeah, it's gonna be a really bad. It's gonna be. And not for incrementally reduce for every year, not be on your tax. That will result in 9% of the. So I think that's 10%. Well, just like this. Increasing one with that, and you can kind of see that there's over, down. We started. Oh, so this is for 2000. Sure. So for every year. Hitting the calculator is possible. Not this increase. So that's everyone did that at least. Well, that's what that would be true. Yeah, other ones. I don't know. Yeah. I know what my story. We're looking at this way. If you were to right now, stay in the stage and chat. So that's what I like. Yeah, and what we're Numbers will grow. You can make sure that the owners of property, places like this is better, that needs to get done. And those are. I'm not saying. There's a point now. That's just the things about. Yeah, with that change.
I'm trying to think of scenario. First, say you have a down year. Like we have. Somebody's never working. Staffing level, or let's say next year, there's like less, so now we're salary. They have a they're in a barracks where they're now. That barracks gets filled way.
It's marginal, so like, I don't know if this is exactly what it is in the HR system. Let's say, I have the trooper salary, so it's like $50,000. So let's say, up to $50,000. So. Right, once they go above that, $50,000, that's the, you know what's going to happen, so we go. Then you start charging a slightly different rate. So after you get lots up or down, it's just asking more compensation to change the rate. So that was fine. So.
Above 50.
Yeah, so you're trying to structure my tasks, so the idea is that like, you're 57, that's the first reason I'm going.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's worth.
So that was 1/3.
Yeah, it's in the pitch report, so it's tax are trying, so last year, that's value, legal bonus salary, so. 4 years of service. That doesn't mean you didn't hire, so it's a lower rate or higher rate, which first makes it different. We just had that. That's what salary. That's an average, right? So if I can go below that, I was like,
I think just from the standpoint.
Yeah.
I'm saying it doesn't make sense to look at it, or not. From what I'm hearing from folks in the field, it's tell me I can pay that much. It's an option, but I think just.
As of,
there's 24.
Who's the oldest? The oldest active. It looks like 2012, there's one person who's got 2009. That was 2001 kids retired, and they're so they're 55. So 15 over there. This is. So this is all about. You should see this on the chart. So basically, the service. And it doesn't take the scale. But the assumption. So he did a order. He did a. This is the average of the board. Let's say, for example, there's a study. As payroll. Yes. You need the address. Just for relevance, one who's gonna cross here. There's 24 of them that are between before that have 15 service. This is the entire system. It's just like, this is the actual place. Safe star air. It's not everybody. What do you want? You have to draw the line on this. There's nothing about it. Yes. They're making. Well, that's it. That's what we're working on. So if there's no way. I don't understand why we had to, we had actuarial losses. So the other thing is like that. Structure of salary. I think they divided those years based off the one that. That's where it's.
Pretty dramatically over at eighties.
Considering. that's their lower. So. Conceptually, I don't think 50 million is a number, but I think there's a pretty compelling case if you do $150 million one-time money. Plus. Right. New revenue. Well, I really have to look to generate, and it can be done over a year. I was looking at, for my thought, it's kind of running on this, but state make $100 million. You know, our problem, the other part. Salary. We also overfund whatever, I'm guessing it's $30 million coming in. The total system. We could, as you guys are ramping up. Oh, this is yeah. Sorry, I know, I would pull it conceptually out to get doesn't. I'd like to see flash. I think that would pay off this at 438. We looked at I think you would think like that. That's the one thing. By a couple of years. That's 2.5% tax credit. And then possibility is 3. So I know that's after 12 years. Yeah, a higher percentage of that. But and we added 50. We have to reach 12 years of service. That's some. I don't that's the scenario. Yeah, so 1.67%. Least 12 years, and then it's once you get 12 years, then it's on 3%. Well, I see that coming from yeah, that's the thing. We're making huge now plus interest. And so say this year, you guys have a quarter point or half point, whatever it is, you're growing and raising $10 million maybe, so the state has to pay 40 or 50. Well, we allow you to ramp up 6 additional investment, whatever that final additional. Am I wrong? For our surplus dollars. So I would make the argument also putting forward what was on the past. So we didn't put it in the very full. It's all something that don't hurt the no, I think we gotta play with it. That's what the actors do. We're working on. The numbers. So, I mean, you see what You know, even if we get 75, 20, it's a 50 cell, it's at 7.3. That's covered in accident. And so, additional revenue of, $50 million. Yeah, we had an attic. Yeah, so when we said like. I know. That translates. Some. So.
But it was.
Now we. I think it's gotta fit something that's where it fits. And then readjust, but I don't, we're not designing. Like,
There are exit scenarios we have to say, increasing the average period for 2 to 3 years, which is our action scenario. And 2 to 5, which is now 6 to 7. Right. Experience. And so that could be, they didn't need the results, yeah.
I mean, I kind of looked at. I don't know.
It's just massive disorder. So
There's gonna be someone there. So this is sort of.
Yeah, but I'm wondering
Okay. The workers gonna pay %. That's. The last few years. At a place where we should have started. I mean, I'm just looking, I'm really got that instead of being on mine, but like. You know, I guess I start somewhere.
And this middle.
Yeah.
That would be better. You're asking what do I? Salary for that. So like if I'm at 25, like, so that, you know, so it's like broken out. But I just
That's gonna be kind of. Are we also going to ask for the whole life? What do you think? Well, but also. Yeah, we're changing that. So. It's 25, so I would go higher. I just think that. Yeah. Yeah, no. That does change. Because that's what's written, so, and that was the only real. It's not. This is really. I mean, what I would do. Focus on.
Some bases, you know, it's whatever.
5 years this stuff. Yeah, or hers and me and all day yesterday. No, they.
Yeah, you're actually.
No, when they suggested.
If they were. Salary this year is 100,000, next year is 100,000. Average is 100,000. Because the average I was thinking going forward. Seems like it's 7:30.
We have. So I feel really good we should actually, I brought an actual, average fund for non. And when you were talking about first, I don't see.
Yes.
This is one area. Saying.
That is other ways of the natural laws.
I do understand.
Let's say they threw the session, filtered through all the spots, but you don't see a lot of. And then comes the thought that we need. So I wish that was something that came for 1 year. It's possible that would be less. And in that case, there's no strength that you're already.
Yeah. So if you could also. Or perhaps. So. Salary. They're not contributing. And I was. In the. That was my question.
Bits and pieces. So, bits and pieces actually.
That's the way my.
So, yes. I'll say this. So the order in which those assumptions are applied may cause. Let's say you're asked something that's right? And say next now, you have something that's. It's going to be what's the additional state of. Goes around. Apply. So. My scenario is the best 97.5%. We look for 32. We'll call you back. But 4 years now, teachers in the state start yes. Call it. 4 million dollars a year, 100% of that. I think the hard part is to, I think that will give us a chunk there, you know, just all this number and see where we can. Maybe look at the rest of the whole change, starting in current tires around that we don't cut polls for the first 40,000 here. We look at polls so long for time so only the one I don't personally want to start there, but this is a starting scenario in my let's just start somewhere and see what the actually gives us a number and then talk about. I think I'm going to use 40 as the years or anybody kind of for 40,000 or whatever. Someone who's going to like retire based on their own company, but too low. That's just a little. you look at everybody, the number is close to 5. What's the average retired last year? 24.
Wait, last year. So I would like to see
So I
some
mean,
numbers
the
right now.
average benefit of somebody who retired is higher than the total year.
For the last 5 years, I guess. Okay. What is the?
Right, I look more at that 3,000 or whatever that is.
But that would be something, you know, where we were talking about having salary.
So as a starting scenario, we don't touch anybody, we add this person. Whatever, that's 48,000. Let's not cut 7,000 for 48,000. And the sector doesn't pull. Because it's just under.
Yeah.
So, and again, this doesn't have to be a, this is I'm just trying to, Sarah's point, at least here's the scenario, at least I'm thinking for things. Let's send the actuaries, figure this stuff, figure out the exact numbers, but that's conceptual. See what that looks like, but we have to say, see how.
You did actually like that. We did it early because I put it in these report. There is some part of that here.
Okay. So my thought would be that it sounds typical. But splitting it to 5%. So 17.5. So it's 30. Oh, yeah. We split that. The state, at the end of the day, they're going to pick up.
Where they essentially.
Right, about 25. But I prorated that whole. That's what I'm putting on the table for. That would be. Make sure we can't extrapolate, so. It's one of those problems that, or wherever it's not one thing, that would be a component of things. Yeah, so. It does bring in, it does. Something that. I mean, it would be, whatever you want to look at. In the mix. So I feel like there's so bringing on 1% increase for those people.
Less than 5 years for our.
And I remember measures for when they get that.
There's about 1% AFC, anyone knows about it, it's 60% AFC continues to work.
Right. And adding that in. And there was such a way that the model. Each way was going. But adding that in.
I think it all depends on how some people
I think. And some are. I think it's 1%. It's going to encourage. There were some people who are, and, you know, there's a trade-off there. Saving, being paid out, and slightly more. On a higher salary, if you live an exceptional long period of time. So like, that's why. I don't think everybody going to either one direct soup or really very much the same thing. No longer. It's not. Oh, I know. I know that. I know, and it's the same.
Right, so I was asking someone who made up. I would be more interested in myself. Because I just stopped paying those.
Here's something to think about. Do you want to stop or that means that the actual impact of the wage is going to be a lot. Or if you want to think about redirecting that contribution to a like for example plan where if you want to be and you have 6% or whatever your contribution rate is, going to this and then figure out why that's a nice little proposal of grow throughout the time.
So you're saying, for instance, say.
I mean, if I was, if I but you know, that's all.
There's that. You're not, well, maybe, a little raise down that part's not.
You're basically not accruing. I'm adding it to like. You're not. And understanding that, making this now. So I think it's
Yeah, so that's what I'll say about it. Yeah, that's interesting. So what if we draw there? I mean, what is normal, what's the difference? Versus factual, you know, I see that ritual starts every person was here.
Again, I worry about that practice. You see the difference of the data on that high end, whether it's 80 less and. I see more than 400 and you have to be there. You want to see it.
I think we need to put some.
We talk about increasing for the work, yeah, 1%, but we're not allowed to tax the 1% when it's not. I think 1%. Seems much more fair. And it would be more money for
We have. It's also that's something everybody makes injuries. It's a long. I don't know that. This